Welcome to episode number 95 for the National Land Realty podcast, where we discuss all things land. Our goal here is to inform, educate, and entertain those of you who own land or are interested in the buying and selling of land throughout the United States. My name is Mac Christian, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty. I'll be your host for this episode. I'm going to jump in here really quick and throw a little promo. It's episode number 95, and that means, if I'm mathing correctly, in 5 episodes, it'll be episode number 100. Now, what we want to do for that, well, okay, let me be honest. What my team has informed me we were doing for that, because they've told me that they really want me to do it, and I'm going to jump in. I'm in. I'm all the way in, and I love my team. So we're going to do this. We're going to do a live episode, which, of course, if you haven't been privy to all of the outtakes I have for this and just the intros that I record, I mess up plenty. So a live episode is terrifying. And in my mind, going to be extremely entertaining. We're going to have myself on here, sort of as the ringleader, and a series of excellent guests. We're going to have our CEO, Ronnie Richardson, as well as a couple partners from industry partners that we align with at National Land Realty, as well as a few agents of ours. It's going to be a great episode. Really, we're just going to get together. We're going to talk land. We're going to tell lies, and we're just going to have a good time. So episode 100, stay tuned. We'll be posting the air date on that so that you can RSVP, so you can watch it live. It's going to be awesome. Okay, let me jump back in here, all right? Right now, land values are high. Actually, all real estate values are the highest we've ever seen. And this presents a challenge for those seeking to acquire land for sale. Now, whether it's for agriculture or recreation, it doesn't matter. It's all the highest prices we've ever seen. And this is especially true for those who don't have the upfront cash to acquire land. As we've discussed before many times on this podcast, land loans are difficult to obtain. So in this environment, leasing becomes more and more important. Now, enter Ryan Schroeter of Nebraska and Aaron Sutton of Virginia. Actually, it's North Carolina, but I got that wrong in the podcast, and I just want to be consistent. Yeah, I do know Aaron personally, and I got his state wrong, and he's going to hold that over my head for quite a while. It's okay. Now, these two have recognized the need together, and they've made the decision to spearhead the leasing department for National Land Realty, which is really a great thing because these two are some of the most knowledgeable land real estate agents in the country. Now, today we're going to discuss how to lease your land, how to find land for lease, and what to look for, as well as things to avoid with land leases. Now, sit back and enjoy. Okay, so I am sitting here. This is a treat today. We got a couple managing brokers with National Land Realty on board, and knowing the people at hand, I don't know how this is going to go. We've got Mr. Ryan Schroeter and Aaron Sutton, respectively, out of Nebraska and Virginia, and you're licensed in other places, but I'm just picking your primary states. But Ryan Schroeter and Aaron Sutton head up our leasing program, and they do so because they see value in leasing in general. And we're going to talk about sort of leasing's role in the marketplace and sort of the respective areas that they work, because the types of leases that they work with are not the same, but they both hold value in the marketplace. And so, Ryan and Aaron, I'm going to pick on you two independently and just give us a brief kind of background of how you started working in land and sort of how you got to where you are now and the start of the leasing program. Aaron, if you could start the session here.
No, I got you. Thank you, Matt, for having us on. But yes, I've been in land brokerage for about 11 years now. I got my real estate license about 18 years ago and migrated over from residential. And, through learning tricks of the trade and building business and whatever, I've made it a successful career so far. And looking into, other avenues of revenue streams and stuff like that, the idea of recreational leases came about. And there is already a market that's out there, but I feel that with our technology and innovative design on our websites and through our GIS platforms, that we can reach some of these landowners that have their land for lease or that are thinking about how can we make extra money on our land. And, it could be just a put two and two together equals four thing. We're looking at it from a revenue stream for us, and they're needing some revenue as well for taxes and, other law cost of living so expensive now.
Yeah, and Ryan, how did you get here?
How did I get started in the land business? Is that what you're
Yeah. Take us on a walk throughout the career of Ryan Schroeter here.
Holy cow, we got to rewind the clock a long ways. 1997 is when I first got my license, salesman license, and I was actually just finishing up my senior year at college. And the company that I was at that time, they're just, it was actually a summer internship is how it turned out to, because the university canceled the credit hour or the 3 hours that I needed for that summer class to actually graduate by the end of the summer. And they're like, hey, if you go do an internship, we'll give you the 3 hours, write your paper at the end. Well, at the end of the summer, they said, hey, why don't you just sit for your test? I did. So then right out of college, I just started with real estate. I was kind of part-time at that time. And then I think it was 2002, I got my brokerage. I moved. And then I think around 2004 and 2006, I decided, okay, I want to get out of the residential. I want to start focusing on just land. And so that's kind of when I made that transition then, is around 2004, 2006.
Gotcha. And so the types of land that you all work with are obviously different. Aaron, you're in Virginia area and for the most part, and Ryan, you're in Nebraska for the most part.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about sort of what is different about, because I mean, when we say leasing, it sounds like it's the same thing, but in both of your cases in your areas, it's going to be remarkably different. Tell me a little bit about the areas that you work and sort of the benefit of leasing in those areas.
Yeah, so I actually live here in North Carolina and commute over to Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah, you had it backwards in your head, but
I had it backwards in my head. I'll own that one.
It's all good. It's hard to keep up with everybody, man. I know
it is very hard.
So working here in North Carolina, I've got a team that I've built in Virginia as well. And we're looking to expand out from that on the recreational stuff. You're correct that different markets are different, bring in different types of leases, where here in North Carolina and some of your more southern states, I guess you could say, there is a huge market for recreational leases from landowners, from private landowners. Out in the Midwest, there are recreational leases, but there's also agricultural leases, which is where Schroeter's family knowledge of farming comes into play with us, that he knows how to talk with negotiating agricultural leases.
Yeah. In North Carolina, where Aaron's from, their primary income stream is, you got pines, right? You got trees wall to wall. And then how many years does it take till you can harvest them?
25, 30. Okay.
So within that time, hunting lease, why those trees are growing falls into place. Where here in the Midwest, a lot of people farm fence row to fence row, and a tree is a weed here. So they'll come out. So primarily the leases that'll be held here will be agricultural.
And so the role of leasing in both those cases, what would make somebody want to look at a lease versus owning land and take it from the perspective of either recreational or agricultural leasing? And I want to talk this through from the bottom up, just so that somebody who's considering it sort of understands their options and the benefits and even, the things that might not be so good about it, and why they would want to look at that, or why they would want to reconsider maybe buying or holding off even.
Well, go ahead, Schroeter.
Okay, I was going to say, for one, land is an excellent investment. Whether it's going to be for recreational or it's going to be agricultural, it's going to make an excellent investment. Now, our job is to look at it and say, okay, now how can we get your return either on the piece of property, like a return period, or B, how can we better the return on your investment, the ROI on it? So therefore, that's what we kind of look at. When we look at the market and say, okay, hey, this farm field here is going to lease around this range. Let's say you got 100, I sell 160 acres. With that, there's 156 that is row crop on there. And you can say, okay, that 156 can lease for, in the range of, let's say 250 to 300 an acre, but we'll narrow that down once we put it out there and see who our interested tenants are. So it's improving, trying to get a return on your investment, and maybe increasing that return is kind of how we start looking at it and approach it that way.
And you're talking in that case, when you're working with the landowner, what about the leasee? When they're looking at land, what would be, do you find that a lot of people are looking to produce? And because I sort of mentally am taking this back to conversations that I've had with cattle ranchers where it's like, yeah, you never want to own the land and run the cattle on it. And that is not across the board, right? That's just like coffee talk kind of stuff. But that does come up, that a lot of producers are not owning, or vice versa, where a lot of owners are not running the land itself. Is that what you're seeing? I'm strictly relaying coffee talk, right? So I'm not throwing out opinion or anything. I'm just throwing things out there because I've heard them.
In my case, it's kind of 50-50. You can't have investors going out there looking to buy as an investor. Then they're like, okay, what's the next step? Or who do I find to farm it or to run their cattle on it? Because those are two avenues on the agricultural side. A is a row crop, and B is hey, thanks, Rob. I just had a nice interruption. Rob just brought me some craft beer. So one of my clients just got popped in, raised some beer up. So I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. So no, for agricultural and pasture leases, that's what they look at. Is okay. I need some money. I'm gonna park this money in the land. Okay, now who's going to run the cattle on it, or now who's going to farm it for me and be a good caretaker of the land? So help me find that caretaker, because I don't have the cattle or I don't have the equipment to farm, but I like the idea of owning land. So how do I go out there and get everything done?
And
does that echo across to your market, Aaron?
So our market is a lot different than the Midwest. Where they have a lot of absentee landowners or investors, whatever, that they need a farm manager to take care of all their land, because the farms out in the Midwest are so much larger than what we have in North Carolina. If we did that around here with farmers, they would find us at the store and beat the brakes off of us, because they would, y'all are ruining it. You're price gouging us and running rates up and all this stuff. And it would create ripples in our market of, don't mess with him. He's a shiesty guy getting rates up, farm rates. So now a few of the farmers would be willing to do it that have a little bit deeper pockets, but it's a huge no here in North Carolina and most of our southern states. Just let the farmer deal with the landowner directly. And yeah.
So what about in the case of recreational land? Like that's, and really, I mean, that comes down to resources, right? There are landowners that have use, they're using it for one thing or another, timber or something else, and it's an extra source of income. And then you have, essentially people that want to get outdoors, that's the only option, right?
That's right. So like what you were talking about earlier with owning or leasing land, a lot of times it comes down to budgets. You might have 3 or 4 buddies that come together that are just out of college or whatever, just 40-hour work week day jobs that just, they make money, but they don't make a ton. You go spend on buying a $300,000 piece of land at 9% interest. They'll pull their money together and you have, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 and be able to go lease 300 or 400 acres. Then on the landowner side, you got this little old lady that just got a tax bill. Taxes just went up, and she needs the extra money to pay her property taxes because Lord knows, especially the older folks, they don't want their name in the newspaper at the end of the year that they haven't paid their property taxes. So that's where we're able to connect the dots between landowners and extra income revenue.
And you were just talking about the role, and you were talking about kind of like the role of a real estate agent, right? When it comes to agricultural leases, like as far as your role in the equation, right? You were talking about like landowner should in your area would link directly with the leasee and for the reason that you just discussed, where getting the lease to market, and that's really where kind of the agent comes into play, is one, negotiations, and two, the marketing. Is that able to overcome any of the issues with agriculture, or is it just strictly a no holds barred? You don't go
pretty
there.
much no thing. And the thing about it is, in the Midwest, they're getting $250 to $350 an acre on farm lease. So here we're getting 75 to 125 on the high end. There's little pockets here and there that are higher than that, but for the most part, we can call it $80 to $100. It's not worth the bad reputation that we're going to get for the little bit of money that we would make through the marketing and whatever to squeeze a little more money out of that farm. It's not worth the bad name to me as a land broker in the whole, not just as, handling recreational leases or agricultural leases.
That makes a lot of sense. I wanted to kind of like circle that up and be like, okay, what's the kind of the role? Now, so the question I wanted to ask both of you is what we've seen over the last, 4 years have been some of the highest increases in just real estate value in general, but just land value as well. Especially what we've really seen is the upward momentum of land that produces food. That is one of the highest acceleration curves that we've seen in any kind of pricing for any kind of real estate. It's crazy, especially when you look at areas like Kansas and stuff like that in the lower Midwest. So what effect have you seen that have in the market? Has that driven up the demand for leases? Because it really acts as a barrier to entry for anybody looking to get into land for production value. It's hard to buy the land, so now they're looking to work it. Do you see an increase in that?
Particularly, I don't see an increase on the recreational side. What I have, because there's so many recreational leases out there, I haven't seen more of them coming to the table. What I have seen is an increase in lease rates, going from here we're at $8 to $15 an acre. Now we're at $10 to $20 an acre. So we've seen the bump rates, the rates bump up with the market increase. Now our land values have increased, so therefore people can't afford as much now or whatever. So you ran out of some of your buyers on that front from actually purchasing real estate, but everything's inflated. I mean, everything from your milk and eggs to recreational leases.
Yeah. What about you, Ryan? Have you seen an increase in demand or maybe the opposite? I don't know.
There's always an increase in demand. That's kind of how and why we kind of started the agricultural side of the leasing, is because we may have a farm for sale in Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota, and we have individuals that reach out to us like, hey, I'm not interested in buying this, but is there a chance I can rent this? So while we're advertising a farm for sale, we have a lot of tenants reach out to us, or possible tenants or future tenants, whatever you want to call them, reaching out to us and saying, not interested in buy, but I do want to lease. You may have this listed in this county. Hey, I farm a lot in this county. Anything comes available. So that's kind of how we started. And land prices and lease prices kind of go hand in hand. We've seen land prices go up, therefore the lease prices go up. And kind of echoing some of the things that Aaron said here 5 minutes ago is, our range can be anywhere from $175 an acre to $400 an acre. And kind of our job as the property manager is to narrow that down to say, okay, the subject property here that we are talking about is gonna fall tighter within, 200 to 225, is kind of where we should be renting it. And then the other thing too, I want to echo off of Aaron is when he says, farmers in your area, our job is not to jack that up to make the tenants pay more. We just like to see an individual getting market, because I have seen areas when we list a farm for sale, we're like, we've had a tenant on here, he's paying $150 an acre. It should be on the upwards of $250, $275 an acre. Well, that's just the way it's been for years. Okay, well, that's kind of our job, is to look at the market and say, hey, you should be getting this. This is market. But then there is the other side of the coin too, where I don't want a bunch of hate mail coming in by what I said, because I don't want to be the wedge that comes into a family because grandma has got the land, she owns it, and the son and grandson are farming it. And yes, they may be paying under market for a reason, because they take care of a lot of grandma's stuff, but grandma wants more. I don't want those phone calls or those emails coming in and saying, hey, this is why we don't want a property manager. I don't want to be involved in a situation like that. I'll give you my advice and say, you should do this, because I understand there's two sides of a coin. They probably do a lot of stuff around the farm and take care of grandmas and everything else. But then grandma's like, hey, I was at coffee and so-and-so's farm, she's renting it out for this, and I'm only getting that. So there are going to be those conversations. And like I said, I don't really want to be involved in those, but I can give you my advice and you guys can take it or leave it from there. But another reason how this started evolving, because we've had more investors buying dirt or we are selling a property from a farmer and it says, look, I will sell this on the only condition that it's a sale with a lease back. And so now we were doing the leases right at the time of sale. So now we're just going to continue that service on past the sale as well.
What is the structure of a lease back? Just like, how do you build that out? Just curious I kind of know, but I don't want to pretend to know things I don't. So I'd rather just ask.
A sale leaseback is just very simply, look, I own the property. I'm going to sell the property, but the condition of the sale is that I am able to lease it back, i.e. farm it for at least, usually when we do a sale leaseback, it'll be an extended period of time for 3 to 5 years, somewhere in that window. And so I'm going to set up a lease and saying, okay, me, the seller, yes, I'm going to sell it to the buyer, but now after closing, I am going to lease it back and farm it for another 3 years at X rate. So and why they do that is usually to pay off some other things too, or it might be a farm that's 10 miles out and they bought something closer and they're like, well, guess what? I could sell that one. I could lease it back, but I bought this one real close. So it's a way of pushing money around or to get more acres within your operation.
Do you ever see the opposite scenario where it's almost like a lease to own, rent to own kind of situation?
No, a lot of those, I wouldn't want to call them lease to owns. A lot of them will be a seller carryback where the seller will sell to a buyer, but the seller will carry back the note, as in kind of like they're the bank. The buyer comes in, puts X amount down, and then they structure out the loan repayment, where the seller carryback is what we'll call it, or a land contract. And that seller will technically be the bank and there's a variation of terms that we could set up, but a typical one would be, okay, I'm going to carry you for, once again, 3 to 5 years. We're going to figure out a down payment, and then we're going to figure out a monthly payment or a quarterly or annually payment. And then that's on top of owning the land. So the seller technically is the bank on that kind of thing. But I've never seen really a rent to own type deal.
Gotcha. So what kind of drove the two of you to jump on this and start kind of heading up leasing for, we're just going to say running and leasing for a national company here? Like, do you feel this is an underserved market?
I feel it is. There are some companies out there that are doing recreational leases, but it's a twofold for us. First of all, it generates a little bit of revenue for us, but the second thing is it gets us in front of landowners Little old lady that's wanting to, her taxes went up, whatever, like I was saying earlier. Well, she leases it through me for 5 years, and I'm able to get her extra money for it that she would have been leaving on the table, so to speak. Now she needs to sell this farm, or she's trying to think the bigger picture of, what happens when she passes away. So it's easier to split money than it is to split land. So let's sell it for 100,000, give 50,000 to both of my kids, whatever. Then they won't have to fuss over it. Who's the first person she's going to call? The land broker that's been handling all of her lease. You built that relationship, the trust with her, so on. So I mean, that's the twofold side of it: revenue for us, but potential sales for us as well.
Yeah, so that's from your side of the equation too. Like that's a long-term investment, right? Like you're by doing that, you are acting as a long-term consultant for that landowner and helping them build out their strategy with the land, which kind of takes on that consultative approach of like, yeah, lease it for this long and then sell it eventually, or here's how to manage it. And in the case that you just spoke to too, it is the case for like an older landowner. A lot of landowners leave land to multiple kids, and I don't know of any. It's rare when I see that work out well. Like there's usually a fight somewhere toward the end.
There's 8 or 10 of them that own the property together. One's paying the property taxes, so he or she thinks that he or she should get the lion's share because they've been paying the property taxes for the last 10 years on this property they all inherited. They ain't spoke to each other since 1985, and it is a lot of turmoil. But from the sales side, trying to wrangle that together is it's like herding cats that don't get along. I mean, it's a hard one to do. Or getting 15 people to choose one type of pizza to order. Pepperoni, mushroom, all the way. What's it going to be? You're never going to get them to agree to a sales price on that tract of land. So it's nice to have that thought ahead of time. And we'll be the first person that they think of, because I use the old analogy or saying of building relationships 1 acre at a time. And through us leasing that person's land, you never know where that relationship's going to take you. And word of mouth is better than anything in this world.
Now you just said building a relationship 1 acre at a time. Is that what you said?
Yep.
That is pretty profound. There's no way you thought of that.
Swear to you. Swear to you.
No, I like that. But that's the other thing too, is building that relationship. Yes, it is a long play, but that's a way. Honestly, building a relationship 1 acre at a time, that is great. And that is the whole basis of our business. The longer we're in this business, the more relationships we built. And the other thing too is if you have that relationship over a year with that landowner, now it does come time to sell. You've already built that relationship, and there's always that let's say I meet anybody for the first time. There's always that kind of give and take. Okay, we're gonna figure out who knows what. It is an interview up front. Well, you've kind of already taken out of that interview out of the way. She trusts you, you trust her. You've already built a good relationship. So when you come to a person and said, I think your property is worth that, they're gonna know you're generally what you're talking about, or they're gonna trust your opinion of value on that. And the other thing too is kind of want National Land to be one of those companies that is kind of the Walmart. It's a one-stop shop. We offer leasing, we offer sales, we offer auctions. So, just adding another service that we can offer to our clients or landowners out there within the 48 states that we service.
That's right.
So what is, and we've kind of talked about the role of facilitation, and Ryan, you just spoke to it too. And the point that you just raised, I think it holds a lot of value, is that when you are working with that land with somebody for a long period of time, you also get a knowledge of that land and how to sell it. It's not a cold start. And like you're talking about the familiarity with the person, but you also have the familiarity with the land.
True.
Because when you go to take this to market, and if they want to sell, you have an in-depth knowledge of exactly how this place works. How it generates income, the challenges of the property, things that could be improved. There's all of those things that you have sort of in your pocket. Now, from the business standpoint, what sort of role have you both taken in facilitating leases and working with the landowners? What are the things that you handle logistically?
Well, that's still all being ironed out right now. No, truly, Ryan's handling the agriculture stuff. I'm handling more of the recreational. In the big scheme of it, now we're both going to be able to dabble in both. But building a team of agents across the country is the first logistic goal. Is having boots on the ground in every state that can service whatever that we need. Kentucky to Kansas to Texas and all the way back up to Southeast. That's the biggest thing, is getting the right person there. And then, all right, how do we get in front of landowners? That's one of the biggest questions of real estate land brokerage, is how do you get in front of more landowners? So we've got a few techniques, which I'll share with you off the camera, but I'm going to give all of that proprietary information out. But we do have some marketing techniques to get us in front of those landowners that we're using.
Yeah, and also what I'm curious about too is when you work with a landowner, what's sort of for a landowner, what's their reason that would be working with you, as opposed to just like, well, I'm just going to throw an ad in the newspaper, something like that.
Well, it's the same thing as sales goes. They don't understand what that property is worth, whether it's a lease rate or a sales price. They might think their property is worth $100,000. We can get $250,000 for it, through our marketing and whatever. We can bring buyers to the table, and they would have sold it for $100,000 and missed out on a nice payday. The same thing goes for lease rates. They think they're getting $8 an acre and they're killing it. Where if we were to use our marketing, we're $18 to $20 an acre. It's not a ton of money when you're talking about just $10 an acre on a 100-acre tract, but that $1,000 extra could, buy some Christmas presents or, whatever. It's not going to make your house payment every single month for the whole year. But knowing the market is the reason that they should use us. It might cost them a little bit. Obviously, we make money, a small percentage of it. But if it costs us 6% or costs them 6%, but they're making 25%, then it's worth it.
I think one of the biggest values is knowing the area, especially if they're an absentee landowner. I mean, that's where the service is really going to come in, because we have local people there. B, let's say, and we can handle it from everywhere. Let's say they already have a tenant, but let's say they move and they want someone to go look at the farm, look at the property periodically throughout the year, send them pictures and saying, yep, I was happy to be driving by, took some pictures, here you go, crops look good, or whatever, or yep, they picked up the pipe that was laying there that you asked them to do. Or whether it's taking over an existing lease that they already have and making sure they're getting market rates every year, or B, finding a new tenant because their other tenant for some reason left, finding a new tenant and taking that from the ground from, okay, yeah, we interviewed 3 other guys. We think this guy here is going to be the best. I know we're probably not going to get the most out of him, because there's sometimes, and this comes on the agricultural side, to where if you're chasing a high dollar, that tenant might not be the perfect tenant for the farm, because they're going to take everything out of the farm, not put anything back. They're not the best caretaker for it. To where if we give up $25 an acre, now we have the right tenant in there, and he's going to do the extra things in there because he's not paying the top rent. So there's those things that we have to look at too. Is the property and the tenant, are they all a good fit to it? And sometimes it's not about the high dollar.
How often are the two of you involved in the leasing agreement or the negotiations of it?
That's where it all starts.
So everything from the lease agreement, we put it together between the landowner and the leasee, and we also handle insurance. We have a blanket policy that we can, if somebody says, hey, we want insurance, I believe it's about 30 cents an acre is what we're running on.
That's on the recreational side, right, Aaron?
That's on the recreational side. That's right.
Yes.
So we can throw insurance on it if we need to. If somebody, because you're going to have a coverage policy, whether on your own or through us, before you're allowed on the property. So we're guiding you the whole way.
How often do you come across landowners that have sort of run their own lease agreement that this is just curiosity of mine. Do you see people getting into bad lease agreements because they tried to do it on their own?
Not necessarily bad ones. There are some bad ones out there, but a lot of it's handshake, and that's so broad and leaves up so much room for somebody to get injured, liability. Somebody sells their farm. How do we get paid? We paid you $1,000. Well, it's cash under the table. I mean, there could be a lot of gray area there that you never know. But it happens a lot with handshake.
Say the handshake thing. Like I definitely recognize that, and there's an old school sort of mentality to it, and there's like I'm a good person and you're a good person. Let's just agree. But it just seems the more you hear about it, the more you cringe, because just the handshake agreements create conflict. Because
on small tracts, it's not so big of a deal. Even in North Carolina, just say you have a 100-acre tract for $10 an acre, that's $1,000. It's not the end of the world. Where in the Midwest, you got an agricultural lease on 100 acres for $300 an acre. You're $30,000. Now we're talking about substantial money. And that farm gets sold, and next thing you know, the guy's out. He's only been able to farm it half a year or whatever, and he's got to get $15,000 back or something. It can be, those handshake deals can leave a lot of questions.
Well, on those verbal contracts that you're talking about, on agricultural side of things, believe it or not, a verbal lease will hold up. And if you do not give that tenant due notice, A, that you're selling it and the new owner's taking over, or B, I'm not going to allow you to farm it next year, like in 25, you have to do that prior to September 1st. So there are other areas there. But a verbal lease on the agricultural side, that'll hold up. You can't say, hey, I'm kicking you off halfway, or I'm going to refund you, something like that. So that's the difference in versus Aaron's area in my area. There's a big difference in those, and knowing that difference is kind of where we bring our value.
And then you were kind of nodding your head there when I was asking if you see bad lease agreements. Is that something you see on your side of things?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Yeah. We just got through a closing where it got into a he said, she said deal on the farming lease. We got involved in it in selling this property after September 1st. I think it was around December when we put it up for sale, and then it still was for sale. Comes around the 1st of March, and the owner thought he told the tenant verbally, but that doesn't hold up. You cannot give a person verbal notice to get off the farm. You have to have a written, and he didn't do the written part. Whether he did it or not, don't know, cannot confirm it. But then it came up to like, okay, well, we found a new tenant. Oh, now the old tenant was mad. Hey, I do have rights, which he did, and he's still farming it. But there are scenarios like that time and time again. I think if you rewind some of these podcasts, Mac, we went over one, and it was over 1,100 acres. That we had this same scenario. And believe it or not, that seller was an attorney. So yeah, that was kind of an interesting concept.
So how do you see or I guess the question is, do you see the leasing market with potential to evolve, and what do you see it evolving to over the next few years? Because none of these markets ever really kind of stay the same. Or do you see it staying the same as far as demand and supply?
I see staying the same, because in our area, this conversation I have with an investor. Let's say an investor is looking at an apartment complex. Yeah, the return on investment is probably higher But the vacancy ratio is also higher on that too, and the maintenance on those are higher. Where land, there isn't a vacancy ratio. It's never vacant. There's always someone that wants to farm it, wants to do something on it. So like we said before, it's just another service that we can offer an individual, whether they need it or not.
What about you, Aaron?
So I didn't really understand how you were wording that question.
Yeah, so I just didn't know if you saw sort of if you think that leasing will be in higher demand in sort of the next few years, or if just the supply and demand will kind of stay where it is as far as the market for it. How do you see that playing out?
The recreational leases have been around long before I was born. So there's always been that people finding other reasons or ways to generate money off their land. I don't see it ever changing. Kind of like what Ryan was saying, we'll see the rates go up as with the times, but I don't see it slowing down at all or going away or anything, bar something just terrible will happen inside of a market or something.
Yeah, well, and part of my curiosity is with if land prices don't correct to the negative, which is kind of what we're seeing. We're seeing sort of a plateau in land values. We're not seeing huge declines. If that creates a more competitive marketplace where leasing might be harder to acquire or more expensive to get because people are driving up the price because a lot of people want leases and it's harder to get land. And that's what I was curious about is whether that might be kind of a price war scenario for leasing where you might see further inflation on getting land to recreate on.
This actually happened during COVID. They shut down the Canadian border. A lot of guys, they would take hunt trips over into Canada every November. I mean, I've done it myself, and they had 3 different planes that were just full of hunters, just literally leaving out of RDU, headed to Canada. And so they got, hundreds of thousands of people coming in to go hunting. They shut down the border. All those guys still had money to spend. And obviously, especially with COVID, we had a lot of free time because if you were around somebody that called for 2 weeks, you had to whatever. So those people were looking somewhere to go hunting because now they can't go to Canada. So we saw, like in Iowa is a draw state. 4 years ago, it was 3 points that it took you to get a Iowa deer tag. Now it's 5 years. So, 4 to 5, depending on which zone that you're in.
I'm on my 4th year, but that's all right.
I'm on my 3rd. But it's that 4 to 5. You push back a year or two of being able to get that tag because of the influx of people applying because of the COVID standpoint to not being able to go over to Canada.
Do you see the price of land values driving a similar scenario?
Yes, absolutely. I mean,
I was going to say the other thing on the agricultural side that's going to, make it competitive, drive the prices too. It's going to depend on location. And then when I'm talking about location is that farmer next to a bigger farmer? That bigger farmer, he'll want more acres. He may pay a little bit more than a smaller farmer. That's what I'm kind of talking about in location that will drive it. What close proximity to a larger farmer. They're always wanting more acres. I mean, all farmers want more acres, but it just depends on, who wants to pay more for it sometimes too. Your land prices may have plateaued off for the last, 12, 18 months, but then all of a sudden you see this one farm at least higher than the other ones. Well, they could have got into a little bidding war, and that's what drove it up, just because it was a closer proximity to their larger operation.
So I want to steer this into the landowner prospective buyer, or let's not say buyer, prospective leasee situations. What do you need to know before leasing your land if you haven't done it before? And what are the things that sort of you should red flag that you need to improve before you go into it, or even just expectations before you go into leasing your land?
So from the recreation standpoint, You've got to look at it. If you've got ponds on the property, are you going to allow them to fish throughout the year, or is this just a deer hunting lease only? Because everything in it is negotiable. Turkey hunting rights. Some people might love turkey hunt but don't want to deer hunt, so they'll just lease out the deer hunting rights. So from the landowner side, you need to look at it from, do I have any use for this property myself or my family? And then it goes down to, all right, how many trucks are allowed on the property, or four-wheelers allowed to be on the farm? And, is there a house involved, some kind of cabin or whatever? Who handles that side of stuff, electric bills and whatever? Is that included? Then it comes down to the insurance, making sure that everybody has their insurance, that everybody that's on the farm is signed up on that insurance policy. So there's a lot of things, and that's where we come in to help navigate. If you're just looking at turkey hunting lease, then it's one rate. But if the whole farm and you've got fishing, camping, they don't really care what you do as long as you're good stewards of the land, we can double or triple that lease rate. So from a landowner standpoint, they just need to think about what they're wanting to get out of the land and what they're going to let them use it for.
Agricultural side is going to be a little bit simpler. I mean, dry land is dry land, but then the other thing is pasture is kind of pasture. You're going to look at the water. If there's automatic waters on the property, are they well maintained? But then once we get into like an irrigated quarter or an irrigated 80 or whatever, it just comes down to the well and to the pivot and power unit, or if it's electric, who's going to take care of that? Who's going to maintain that? Set some caps on those expenses. That is negotiated. There's a lot of different things that you could do that too. And, or sometimes on an irrigated quarter, the tenant may own the pivot as well. So there's a few more variables when you get into an irrigated quarter.
And so what about the same sort of question from a leasee? If you want to lease land, what's some of the things that you should look at avoiding? There's obviously, it's going to be a lot of the contract stuff, because you're going to be looking for things in there that could bind you, could be a bad agreement. Maybe there's a time cutoff or something like that you aren't, you didn't read through, but sort of like, how do you get into the market? How do you find the land? What's sort of some of the things that you should look at as a leasee situation?
So as a leasee, you need to go to nationalland.com and search for our leasing page, and that'll show you what we have there. But from a leasing standpoint, actually being on the land, you got to look at rates. What can you afford? What do you want out of the property? It goes back to the landowner thing. Are you just wanting turkey, or are you wanting to be able to have no bars hold, or no bars hold on it? So you got to figure out what you're wanting out of the property from a leasee standpoint also. Then you also got to look at the small details. What if this guy does sell this tract of land? How is this going to be divvied up? Is it on a per day basis? Like a proration on taxes? Well, say you lease it in June 1st, and they sell the farm August 1st. Well, you have never been able to actually even hunt that property, because here in North Carolina, our season doesn't start till our bow season starts in September. You never even got to step foot on the tract of land to deer hunt, and here you are having to pay this man, $400,000 or $500,000 for that proration that you never even got to use the property for. So, some of those little fine details can get you.
You also wanted to ask some questions. What was a previous tenant like? Why did he leave the lease? If he moved, that's one thing. But if it was, didn't have success on his hunting, and or this is wetter ground, and you go out and look at it right now and it's dry. Those are just ask a few more questions and look at the property. Those are the two biggest things. As far as on the tenant side of things, I would recommend.
Those are very good suggestions. So we're closing out on the hour here. I want to give a chance for the two of you, if there's anything I didn't cover that you think would be of value, or kind of any last points to make on the leasing side of things. I want to leave it up to you on your knowledge and background. Anything that we haven't covered so far.
The one thing I would want to touch on is on any type of lease, there may be the landowner may just have a question. Pick up the phone and call us. I mean, Aaron and I both, we're land geeks. We'll like to sit there and we'll talk about land all day, every day. So if you guys have just simple questions, please reach out to us. We'll talk to you. We're not gonna charge you by the minute that we talk to you, or you think we're gonna try to sell you something. If you just say, hey, look, I got a simple question, pick up the phone, call one of us. And I could probably almost say that for just about any and all National Land agents. Feel free to pick up the phone, to call us, and then maybe we can help you, maybe we can't, but maybe we can give you suggestion that'll help you. That's the biggest thing, is everybody's always afraid of approaching us if you don't know us. We are here to help you. I mean, we don't have to list your property. We don't have to lease your property. We're happy to help if it doesn't involve a sale or a lease.
Yeah, we are not high pressure sales in this. Me and Schroeter are not, at least. If we can help you, in any way, we're more willing to help you. But going to the recreational leases and the agriculture, if there's somebody out there that doesn't know what their land is worth, or they might be taken advantage of on some of their stuff, not paying a fair lease rate, $5 an acre or something, call us and we'll evaluate it. I mean, everything we do evaluation wise is free. And then if we're able to help make you some money, then we'll talk about negotiations on commission structure, stuff like that. But just call us. Don't be scared to talk to us.
I was going to say, some of my best professional work throughout my career has been done for people I never ended up working with.
Yep.
Just being able to provide the information on there. And it's like, of course, everybody wants to do business, but you just want to be good people in the end anyways. So it's
that, and you never know where that relationship's going to take you, which goes back to building relationships 1 acre at a time. You never know. You could deal with that lady's with a grandma, and she tells her grandkids about you. Well, next thing you know, they've got 30 tracts of land that they inherited, and they're calling you because of that relationship that you built with that elderly lady.
Or that same lady could be at coffee talking about it, and then another lady overhears it, and now we have a conversation with somebody else. So that that can spin in so many different directions, and that's why we are happy to help.
Excellent. Well, I didn't know where I was going to head. I thought there might be some shots fired or some good wisecracks and good jokes along the way, but I appreciate it.
Well, you're recording this. That's why I had to kind of keep it.
Did you tone it down for me? You toned it down for me.
PG. I mean, if
PG is pretty good.
For anybody out there that's looking to call somebody that's more knowledgeable, call me rather than Schroeter.
Oh, proof is always in the pudding, and I have years on the job, so that's really all I have to say.
Well, regardless, y'all kept it at pretty high end knowledge. You kept everything. You dropped a lot of knowledge throughout this, so I appreciate that, and anybody listening is going to appreciate that. So to both of you, it's always a pleasure talking to both of you. And to their point, give these gentlemen's contact information will be in here. They're in the middle of setting up the leasing program nationwide. So they'll be able to send, whether you're in their state or not, they'll be able to find somebody for you to work with, or a conversation to be had if you have questions about leasing your land or acquiring leases. This is definitely a resource, and these two are running the things in their respective areas and acquiring new agents in new areas. So both of you, again, thank you very, very much for your time. It's always appreciated.
Well, thank you, Mac, and thank you. And Ryan, go get those beers on ice.
Well, I know I'm sitting here admiring these. I'm like, look at this. And this is once again, offered some good advice. He dropped by some beers. It's always great. So that's the thing is, I like apple pie too. So, hey, what the heck?
Those are fancy cans too. I don't even know.
I know. Isn't that?
You want to drink those?
I'm going to drink them. You guys aren't.
All right. Well, thank you two gentlemen, and much appreciated.
Thank you.
This concludes episode number 95 for the National Land Realty podcast, discussing land leases with Ryan Schroeter of Nebraska and Aaron Sutton of Wyoming, or as he pronounces, North Carolina. You can learn more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com. Reminder here at the end as well, tune in for our live episode 100, date to be announced. Thank you and have a good day.